Hello, everybody. This is Scott and Blake, and we are here to talk about Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode number 2, Disengage. And for a fair warning right off the bat, this is a spoiler review, so we're going to be spoiling things for both Episode 1 and Episode 2. And because I got yelled at, we may also talk about other Star Trek properties that, have been around for over a year. So if you haven't watched the new stuff, we may talk about it. Just fair warning. I got yelled at about that a few weeks ago. So just throwing it out there. So we'll go ahead and start talking spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Worf cuts somebody's head off, and it's badass. So Blake, what are your first impressions on Disengage?
So with Disengage, my first impressions are I have to go straight to that scene. You already mentioned it, Worf cut someone's head off. As I'm watching this, episode through and we get to that scene I'm watching and it's Worf because as he comes in and then you've got that classic Klingon theme. And I also want to say I am so thankful to Terry Matalas and the showrunners of this that they went with the classic Klingon makeup.
Yes.
That Worf had. They didn't try to reboot Worf into the horrendous Klingon makeup from Discovery. So I was very appreciative that they did that. Overall, I think this is a solid episode continuing in. It establishes exactly who Jack Crusher is. We are dealing with Picard's son, allegedly. So in that scene, that look with Beverly on the bridge, just, well acted. I also want to say, I mentioned in our first episode, I had some concerns about Ed Spielers in the role with Jack Crusher. The scene that sold me on him was this one, with him and Picard when he's sitting in the brig and that conversation between him and Picard. They nailed the hell out of that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm posted on one of the Picard Facebook groups 4 hours ago when this thing dropped, that even that look between Picard and Beverly is more opportunity for Gates McFadden to act than in all of the TNG movies. Yes, I know she says lines in some of the movies, but she does nothing. She gets to actually act. With the look of first surprise and then forlorning and then putting her head down in shame, and that just does a lot. And of course, you and I have seen past this, and I can say confidently that she gets a lot more to do. But I agree with you wholeheartedly on the makeup, and it's not just the Klingons, but obviously, I mean, if you would have tried to put Michael Dorn in that atrocious makeup, it would have been something else. But we've seen Ferengi in Discovery. Now, of course, they are Ferengi from 1,000 years later, but they still look bad. And so they use the normal Ferengi. They use the normal Romulan / Vulcan makeup. It's almost in its own little universe. I mean, people have been conspiracy theory and all that about New Trek, but it's very hard for me to make a connection between Discovery and Picard now, and that's just because Picard has made good choices with makeup, and Discovery has not. But I loved the introduction of Worf. There are people online now, because this has been out in the wilderness for a few hours, saying, "Oh, well, I knew that Worf was her handler." I didn't when watching this. I figured her handler was going to be somebody we knew, but I didn't think it was going to be Worf. I figured Worf was going to pop in because Picard and Riker are going to go find him or something. Not that he was on the B plot rather than the A plot. So I was surprised by that. But I want to give props again to the composer of this, who is making his own music throughout. It's not that he's just copying and pasting Jerry Goldsmith, but when he needs to, and when it's right for the scene, he definitely pulls the Goldsmith in and the Horner and everybody else as well too, and that's been extremely nice to see. So we've got two main plots here, Blake, for this week. Obviously, the first one is the work, but the action on the Helios, and then also the Titan, and then we've got Rafi's story with now Worf. So let's talk first about Rafi and Worf and what we liked, what we didn't like, all that good stuff about that.
So I did like they pulled together some of Rafi's additional story. You know, when she meets her ex-husband and when she's going to him to get help to meet up with our Ferengi, I believe his name's Sneed.
Yes,
Is that the Ferengi's name?
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, somebody on Facebook's like, "Is that the same Ferengi from Deep Space Nine?" I'm like, no, it's not.
No. But you know, when she goes to her ex-husband up to get introduced, brings up with him, or he brings up with her that she ambushed her son to see her granddaughter. You know, which we saw that in season 1. So it does kind of reference back to that story that Raffi had, and we both commented we really didn't want to see, you know, Raffi redemption take 2. But you still see that conflicted Raffi between service to Starfleet and, you know, what she's trying to prevent and having to choose between that and her family. And she's still facing that choice and the dilemma of having to make those decisions. And you also still see the portrayal of a recovering addict in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's extremely well done.
Yep. And, you know, we talked about this in episode 1 that I think both you and I were concerned that we were going to rehash that same plot point where Raffi falls off the wagon and we got to deal with that again. But it has been well done. And her being forced to take a hit in order to keep her cover, which her cover was blown anyway, but she didn't know that, is something that's really impactful. When somebody is dealing with addiction and dealing with trying to stay sober, and then they're forced for their livelihood to do it, it's rough. It's rough.
Mm-hmm.
Bill is in the chat and he says, "Hey, how am I the only one here?" Because Bill, it's really freaking early in the morning. That's why. So, again, we don't get too much in this plot. We obviously get a couple different points that will pay off later on, and that is that for some reason, somebody has framed this Vulcan and or Romulan who no longer has a torso or legs for this attack. And there is a connection here with good old Sneedles, although Sneed is now headless. So it's interesting to see how they are making this part of the show the mystery box and like what's happening here. And yes, you have Vadic, and we don't know who Vadic is yet or all of that, but really there's not much of a mystery story over on the Titan. The Titan's the action story. The mystery story is over here with Raffi and now Worf. That's interesting. And by the way, folks, when you find out, and you will, and soon, and that's the other thing I really don't like about newer TV shows like this, not just Star Trek, is they always drag it out, and you're like waiting until the last minute to find out what the hell's going on. You're going to find out fairly soon what actually is happening. And when you do, your head's going to explode. And it's going to explode in a good way, I think.
And that's a note on this one. The overall pacing on this is pretty good. I mean, we commented on this when we did our initial run through the 6 episodes. Is at no point did we sit there and go, okay, is this over yet? It paces through really well with the reveals, with those pieces like you're talking about. It doesn't drag it out unnecessarily.
So one thing I want to talk about in this side of things is the Worf plot, because I've already seen a few folks question a couple of things. One, the trailer, and if you've learned anything over the years, trailers can lie, okay? So I think back to like the trailer for Avengers Infinity War that had the Hulk involved in the battle at the end in Wakanda, and Hulk isn't in the movie. So trailers can lie, but one of the things that people have been talking about for nearly a year now is that Worf says in the trailer he's a pacifist. The dude's not a pacifist. And we will learn more about what he actually is as we get deeper into this. But how did you feel about Worf really killing some folks?
Yeah, and I saw that trailer comment too, and in all will be explained, but Worf has always been someone who would do what was needed.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes he's been a lot quicker to do it than maybe what he should have been. But Worf is the guy of action. He's the one that's going to jump in there and start swinging the sword. And that's exactly what he did here to save Raffi, because as we've learned, he was her contact. He told her, do not engage, but he also knew Raffi wouldn't do that. So he knew he was going to have to go in there.
Mm-hmm. And I think, again, I'm not going to say too much because we have seen another 4 episodes. Of all of the characters that we have now found again after 20 some odd years, Worf is one of the 2 that I actually think are the most interesting character arcs of where they were and where they are now. And I mean, it makes sense. Michael Dorn as Worf is the character who's been in more Star Trek than anyone else. He was even in a TOS film as his grandfather. I mean, he's been there a lot. So Worf has had a lot to do. And the last time we found Worf, he was going over to be the ambassador to the Klingon Empire, and he was still mourning the death of his wife. So it's interesting to see where he is now. And obviously, in some way, shape, or form, and we don't know exactly how yet, he's working for Starfleet Intelligence. So that's interesting. And it will be interesting to see how he has moved from where he was at the end of Deep Space Nine, because I don't count Nemesis, where he was at the end of Deep Space Nine, and over to this now. So is there anything else we need to talk about with the Raffi storyline before we move on?
The other thing I would comment with Worf, and I think it does pull a bit from DS9 with this path that he's on, he was the ambassador to Kronos. He's now apparently working for Starfleet Intelligence. There was that episode in Deep Space Nine where he made the decision to sacrifice the mission to save Jadzia. And at the end of that, Sisko told him, you'll never be a captain. Mm-hmm. And I think we see the consequences from that episode play out here.
Although in the comics, and we don't know if this comic is canon or not, he was the captain of the Enterprise E. Although I do like the fact that I like the fact that, to your point, I'm hopeful that doesn't actually become canon, because I agree with Sisko. I think he lost his command when he did that. So we'll see.
And I think this carries on the DS9 story more so than the comic does.
Mm-hmm. In more ways than one, but I will leave that for another day.
Careful, Scott.
Foreshadowing. Well, I mean, Terry Metalis has tweeted out stuff that if you read his tweets, okay. But I also did like the new Mek'leth, I believe is what it's called, the kind of half Batleth. So I'm still a Batleth fan. I've always been a Batleth fan, but I like the new sword. The new sword's fun. Yeah. And it slices and dices really well. Okay, let's hop over to the other side of the galaxy with the Helios and the Titan. And, of course, the 2 big reveals that we've gotten in this episode is we've seen Vadic for the first time in her scenery chewing greatness. And we now know, and I actually let this out of the bag last week and I didn't realize it, they didn't actually call him Jack Crusher until this episode. And we now know at the very end that, according to what Picard believes, and it seems like to be true, is that Jack is his son. So where do you want to start with that?
So let's jump in with Vadic first.
Yeah.
Because I think we agree, out of the original Star Trek movies and really the Next Generation movies, there's 2 great villains in Star Trek film.
Mm-hmm.
One is Khan, which they have tried to recreate multiple times and fail every time, including when they made Benedict Cumberbatch Khan.
That movie doesn't exist, sir.
That's right. Sorry. And then the other is General Chang from Star Trek VI.
Yes.
And you've got Amanda Plummer, who is the daughter of the actor who played General Chang. Mm-hmm. And she does so well. I mean, we hear that laugh that she has in this, that just creepy style that she has. Even the chair that she's in on the bridge
Oh
of
yeah.
her ship is so evocative of General Chang in the bridge on in the chair on that bird of prey
Mm-hmm.
that I think they made an excellent choice with Amanda Plummer, and this is a villain unlike what we've seen before. This is a new defining villain.
And I think that's a very good point to make too. One, because of that chair and that bridge, we definitely do get some homages to Christopher Plummer's role as Chang, and I think Amanda Plummer really does when she gets to make those little homages to her dad. It's fun to watch, and you're right. I mean, somebody mentioned online that if they ever need a female Joker, Amanda Plummer's the person to call. Because that little giggle that she does at the end when we go to credits, gives you the wheelies. But to your point, yeah, the two really good villains from the movies have been Khan and Chang. And I know I am in the minority, but I actually think that Chang is a better villain than Khan. Because I think Chang is more, is less black and white. Khan is just like, I'm hunting Moby Dick. That's my thing. Whereas in Chang's like, I really just want to set the world on fire.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think I can say confidently, from what we have seen, this is not a rehash of either one. Vadic is her own thing. And that's what's been interesting to me watching the fan theories online is, people have said, okay, she's a daughter or a granddaughter of a character we've seen. I saw one person say she is a descendant of Khan. I'm like, think harder, guys. There's a thing here, and she is a thing, but try harder. These guys are not going to do the easy way out.
And in fairness, if this was Kurtzman still running this,
Yeah,
I would have that concern.
yeah. I mean, I will give Kurtzman a lot of credit because without Kurtzman and without Secret Hideout, we don't have New Trek. And regardless of what you think of New Trek, I think almost everyone can find at least one thing that they like about New Trek. I haven't seen anyone. Was that?
Except Engadget.
Oh, we'll get there. But I haven't seen anyone say Lower Decks is completely terrible. So a lot of people like Lower Decks. I've seen people like Prodigy. I think a lot of people are going to like this season, even though Kurtzman wasn't the showrunner. And of course, I think you and I both still think that Strange New World Season 1 is some amazing Trek. So, yeah, Kurtzman has made some doozies in his day. Again, I look at Into Darkness and the only Star Trek film I almost walked out of. But without him, we don't have this. So, but hey, let's see. We got also some more stuff in the chat here. Bill has a prediction. Bill says, I think the Defiant will show up near the end of the season during a battle with Vadic, plus Worf would want it there. And then Bill also points out, plus we see the name of the shuttle is called the Savick, and it was in a clip of episode 2 last week after episode 1 aired. And then Bill asks, does Moriarty show up in the episodes we've seen? Bill, I will say that we are still embargoed, so we cannot talk about any kind of spoilers or recaps of episodes that we've seen that have not aired. So I can't answer that question for you.
I will say, though, on the shuttle being named Savick from the Titan, and this has been released online, they released some screen caps of some history stuff of the various ships. And one of the things they put out there was that one of the predecessors to the Titan of the Shangri-La class from the TOS movie era, the captain of which was actually Captain Savick. So Lieutenant Savick from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, went on to become captain of an early Titan.
Mm-hmm. You know, in an alternate universe, Blake, and I'm gonna sidetrack us here for a second. In an alternate universe, there is an undiscovered country where Savick is the traitor. Because that was the original plan. The original plan was to get Kirstie Alley back, and she just passed actually last year. But the original plan was to get Kirstie Alley back to be Savick, because Nicholas Meyer, loved her, and have her be the bridge crew member who is the traitor to Starfleet. So, yeah, that would have been an interesting undiscovered country, I think.
Yeah, that would have been. It would have had a lot more impact being Savick.
But to be,
it was still well done.
Yeah,
that would have had a.
And to be fair to Kim Cattrall, I think she knocked it out of the park.
Oh, she did.
Especially, she was a relatively new actor at the time. I mean, she had done some work, but this was her first real meaty role, and she did great. But I think having Saavik, especially after the illusion that probably Saavik and Spock have a child or could have had a child, would have made things even more interesting. Let's see. Wokel says, I just finished the episode an hour ago, and I need more background on Vadic and her character to judge as a villain. And then Bill says to him, Vadic feels like a female Nero. So yeah, I can see the Nero thing. I mean, Nero kind of was very much hi, I'm just here. I don't really have any mustache twirling. I'm just here to cause trouble and to kill you. And I can see that with Vadic, yeah. Wokel says was having a fanboy moment when Worf showed up. I think everyone collectively had a fanboy moment. And I love, if you're listening, again, we've already kind of talked about the soundtrack a little bit. If you're listening to the soundtrack, the Klingon theme starts playing just a hair before we actually see Worf. We see that one crony get stabbed through the chest, and then we hear the Klingon theme, and then we see Worf. That was done brilliantly. Let's see. And Wokel says, I hope we see more than a female Nero. Again, we do not know who... Okay. You do not know who Vadic is yet. Blake and I do. And I will say that, yeah, don't worry. So, Blake, what else should we talk about with the Helios and the Titan scenes? I did like when Vadic decided to throw the Helios at the Titan. That was fun. Something a little different.
Yeah, definitely, threw a starship at him. That's new. And I did love Ensign LaForge there going, yeah, my father basically said there's no law of physics that can't be turned into a weapon.
Picard's shock at that, like, what did they just do? I mean, we all know what they just did, but did they just do that? And I also do love the fact that the Shrike is packed to the gills with weapons, and we have not seen all of her armaments yet, but it is very clear, and this is I want to get into Shaw as well too. It is very clear to Shaw that we are not going to win this fight. There is absolutely no way we can win this fight. We're an explorer vessel. We're a smaller starship. We're not packing 500 quantum torpedoes or anything. If we go into a shooting match with this ship, we will lose. And so I love that dynamic of having to be torn between obviously our quote-unquote legends who are just used to going in and defying the odds, and this new captain who's just like, he's playing the numbers game. I will lose. So I do appreciate that a lot too. Let's go ahead and dive into Shaw, because Shaw is absolutely, so far in what I've seen online, the most divisive character, which is the point. I think that he was written to be divisive. So what are your feelings so far on Shaw?
So based on the first two episodes and thinking back to my original watch here, I did not like Shaw at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that they put this guy on there that he is overly a pompous ass. And without a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point, and that's what a lot of people are seeing at this point. They're seeing this guy that's being, dismissive and rude to Picard and Riker. He's dead naming Seven. He's just being a prick at this point. And that's all anybody's seeing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of people online, and I don't blame them, especially with the dead naming and just making Seven just completely and totally, just putting her to the side and not giving her any time of day. A lot of people are already writing this guy off and saying that there is no redemption that can come. Somebody's Facebooking me and it needs to stop. There is no redemption. And I actually got into a heated conversation with a person online, as one will do on the internet, about, well, people complain that we get black and white characters and they're boring. But when we get a character who is set up to where they are in a place where you just don't like them, then people write him off right away and say there's no redemption for him. So I'm not saying there's going to be a redemption for Shaw, but if there was, if you've already written him off completely, and I know, Blake, you haven't, you just didn't like him, but if you've already written him off completely and you don't give him the ability to grow, then would you just prefer to have a black and white character again? Would you prefer to have a carbon copy of Kirk and have 3 guys on the bridge who are all gung-ho? And I will say, not only is Shaw well written, I believe, and I'm looking forward to people seeing where he goes, but so far we have seen, and Terry Matalas has referred to these guys as this too, we've seen Riker and Picard as Butch and the Sundance Kid right now. Those two have different views on how things work too. We haven't seen that yet, but they come from different places and they have different experiences and they command differently. So you really got 3 people on that bridge, 4 if you count 7, who all are in a leadership role and all are going to kind of butt heads, and that's going to be fun to watch as well too. Bill says, I hear the Enterprise J is supposed to turn up somewhere this season. Well, I can tell you that because of trailers, the Enterprise F does. I can tell you that. So it'd be a big skip ahead to get to the J. And by the way, the Enterprise J is the most ugly Enterprise ever. It is a pizza cutter. Let's see. Wokal says, I totally felt that Shaw was there to get me baited to hate him, but that's too easy. I think we'll get a redeeming arc character-wise. And then Bill says, by the way, did you mention the Easter egg of the Voyager B last week? By the way, Voyager A is confirmed to be in season 2 of the Prodigy. Yeah, we actually, I haven't really watched Prodigy, Bill, but I do know, just because I pay attention to stuff online, is that Voyager A is in Prodigy. And we're about, I don't know, like 15, 20 years past Prodigy at this point. So it is interesting, and I'll save judgment till the end. It is very interesting that we are going through ships like I go through Amazon boxes when they come to my house. Enterprise E is gone. Enterprise F has only been around for probably about 15 years, and it is being decommissioned, has been shown on screen and also through secondary sources. So we're just flying through ships. So it's interesting.
Well, that's not exactly new either. I mean, the Enterprise D wasn't that old.
Yeah, that's because Deanna crashed it.
Well, that's, don't let Deanna fly the ship. The C, I don't remember canon-wise, the C wasn't around that long either.
Well, no, I mean, because the C got blowed up by the Romulans.
Yeah.
So I think the C was like only a couple years old when it got taken out.
But I guess running through ships isn't exactly new for Starfleet. But you have some Excelsior class ships that have been around for, ever.
Yeah.
They reuse that sucker like none other.
Well, the Excelsior is kind of like the Subaru of the fleet. They just don't die.
Yeah.
Woko says, Enterprise J, was that the pizza cutter? Yes. Enterprise J was an Enterprise, and it literally looks like it has one deck, but it's a mile long. It is a bad design. Thank you, Enterprise. But that was just one possible future that was shown to Archer. So I'm just going to assume the Enterprise J, not that. Discovery had a Voyager in it. I forgot the letter. Yes. When Discovery, again, this is a spoiler, but it's been out for 3 years now. When Discovery goes forward in the future, they do see a Voyager. They also see the USS Nog, which was a nice little nod to Aaron Eisenberg.
Yeah, Discovery was the Voyager J.
Voyager J. Okay, the Voyager J, which I guess the Voyager is always going to look like the same thing because every Voyager looks the same. Speaking of that, there's been some discussion online too, and we haven't gotten into all of it, but I think we can talk a little bit. You and I both have said that we do like the Neo Constitution Titan, but one of the rubs people are having, because nerds will be nerds, and I am one of them too, is we are told through side information that the Titan A is actually the same Titan, the Luna class Titan, that Riker commanded. And it went through a massive refit. So how do you feel about that, Blake? The fact that we are having supposedly the same ship, even though it looks completely different than the Luna class Titan.
So I didn't actually take the dialogue to mean that it was the Luna class Titan.
Mm,
And also the addition of the A indicates it's a different ship. Now, I know they said it had a refit,
yeah.
but at the same point, the Enterprise A that launched at the end of Star Trek 4 versus the Enterprise A in Star Trek 6, the ship went through some changes over a period of time. Not so much massive external changes,
Sure.
but there were some changes.
Hmm.
The Galaxy class, the Enterprise D from TNG to Star Trek Generations had changes to it. So I'm thinking that what they really meant was, yes, it's a new ship. It's not the Luna class, but somewhere in its operation, it had had a refit for what it was.
Yeah, see, I think it's the other way around. And, you may be right, but they've been releasing log entries on Instagram. And this is also where we first found out that the Enterprise F was due to be decommissioned. But the log entry for the Titan was basically that the Titan was commanded by Captain Riker and went through a massive refit that only kept the superstructure, and everything else was changed. And there is some dialogue coming, and that's all I'm going to say, that I think corroborates that theory. That I think this is the Luna class Titan completely redone. But we'll see. And again, it has nothing to do with the plot. It's just, nitpicking for nitpicking's sake. Let's see. Yeah, Bill says, I heard it was basically an update or an upgraded version of the OG Titan. And then Wokel says, and Wokel, I'll answer your other question in a minute. Wokel says, I'm just happy to see Worf and Geordi again. We haven't seen Geordi yet, but we know he's coming. And Bill says, by the way, have you discussed the poor lighting on the bridge? Yes, that was the other thing I wanted to talk about. And then I know, Blake, you also want to talk about some reviews that have come out as well, too. But the one
I got
thing...
thoughts on the lighting.
Okay, yeah. The one thing I have also had conversations with people on, and I get it, and we also talked about this last week, and we talked about this in our our season 3 review as well, is the dark lighting. And I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about their biggest complaint is you can't even really see the color of the uniforms. Like, for example, they showed a screenshot of LaForge, the helmsman, and she has, red uniform on, but you really can't tell in the shading. So, Blake, where are you on the lighting of this show now that we've seen 2 episodes?
So I think this comes down to what we're looking at in terms of the cinematography of the series. We've talked about this before, that this is not a TV show like what TNG was. This is a 10-hour TNG movie that's the undiscovered country that the cast never got. And you look at the Enterprise D throughout the 7 series of Next Gen, and it was just brightly lit, god-awful colors, 1980s, 90s, beige and mauve color set, very brightly lit hotel in space, right?
The Hilton.
The Hilton. It's the Hilton. It literally, honest to God, is the Hilton in space. Just put a giant H right there on the saucer section. But when we got to Generations, and they put that thing on cinema screens,
Mm-hmm.
they darkened the lighting down throughout the entire sets.
And
you had that updated bridge set.
Yeah.
With the side stations and everything, it was a lot darker than what the series was. Not just the lighting. They darkened the paint tones, the carpeting that they redid. They darkened the whole thing down. They did the same thing in engineering. They did the same thing in Picard's quarters. I think the only set they didn't really darken down was sickbay. But everything else, both tonally and lighting-wise, the corridors and all, got darkened down in Generations when they put it on cinema screens. The Enterprise E was not, it was brighter than the D was in Generations, but even the Enterprise E was a darker color palette and was lit differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see necessarily the lighting as an issue. I think this is filmed more as a movie than something that's going to be on TV screens. And I'll say, Scott, you're watching it on what, a computer or a television set?
Oh, I got my beautiful little 4K TV. Not little.
And
It's big enough.
I've got a 100-inch projection screen with
You win.
4K projector.
You win.
And when you watch it on something like that, the lighting, even though dark, is absolutely just, it's stunning and it works.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, no.
I think some of it is they're designing it more for high def displays, high res displays in large format.
And I have been one who has complained before on other shows with lighting. I'm looking at you, Game of Thrones, in that last battle where I couldn't even see what was going on.
Hell, I couldn't even see that on mine.
Yeah, that was bad. But I agree with you on this, and I've been trying to defend this show, and we've also been accused of being really big fanboys for this season, but that's because I think we are. But yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think the best the Enterprise D ever looked wasn't in Generations, and not when it was on the planet, but actually when it was in space. But I have always been a fan of the Enterprise E. The Sovereign class ship is my favorite ship, and so I'm used to like the darker sets. But I don't. I think people. This is my opinion, and if you disagree, that's fine, and feel free to put it in the comments and tell me why I'm wrong. I think people are overblowing the lighting of this, because that's the one major argument I have seen on Twitter and Facebook a lot is it is far too dark. I can't see what's going on. And to Blake's point, I can absolutely see what's going on. And I think it does look more cinematic. And I think if you took this and put it up on a movie theater screen, it would look like a movie, and that's what they're going for. And unlike season 1, season 2, it's not dark just to be dark. It's dark to look cinematic.
And honestly, if it's so dark that you cannot see what's going on, grab your television remote, go into your menu, into your video settings, and find your contrast control. That will fix your problem.
That was actually one of the things that the Game of Thrones people said when everyone was complaining about that scene in the last season was, look, we're making a show to be cinematic. We can't control every single TV set. I mean, I remember when one of the Mission Impossibles came out, this may have been Fallout, and Tom Cruise put out a video on YouTube with the director of the movie saying, hey guys, when you watch this at home, turn this setting off on your TV because it makes the movie look bad. So when we're having to actually have actors come out and say, can you please change your TV set settings before you watch my movie? Yeah, we're going to have to deal with stuff like that. That's for sure.
Well, and some of that is too, you've got all these different TV manufacturers who are putting their own spin on, you've got Samsung with their QLED, you've got Sony with their MDNA setups, and they're all doing their own like special proprietary picture formulas to call it the most vivid and vibrant. And I think it's getting really hard for filmmakers and even TV shows to try to put out a product that's going to look good on everything, because so many of these TV makers are doing their own systems.
Yep, I agree. Wilkel says, yeah, even with this lighting tone, it's still better than the Night King battle in Game of Thrones. Well, I can talk Game of Thrones all you want and how it really shat the bed, so we can talk about that later. Bill asks, was there more Elcar's Easter eggs in the closing credits? Actually, Bill, from what I can tell, and I have watched the closing credits for 6 episodes, and I watched them because I really like the score, the credits don't change. So, and this is something that actually Picard season 1, season 2 did as well, too. It was a little bit more abstract, but there is foreshadowing in the credits. For Picard 1 and 2, it was in the opening credits, and for Picard season 3, it's in the closing credits. But there are a lot of videos out there. I would direct you to Trek Culture. I think they have the best one so far. I also know a few other ones who did it too. But people have gone screen cap by screen cap on those closing credits, and there is a lot of foreshadowing in those. And I'll leave it at that. I think, Blake, do you have anything else you want to add about the episode proper? There's a lot more to come, and obviously at the very end we do find out that Picard believes that Jack is his son, but I'm sure we will deal with that conversation more, I think, next week. But is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think going back with the part about Gates McFadden and the role she gets to play in this, we saw in episode one, she grabs that phaser and goes after the aliens. And there was a lot of comment about why would she do that? She's a doctor. Why would she, just walk up and shoot a phaser rifle down at someone? And I think we got the answer to that now. We know who she was defending. It was her son. It's Jack Crusher. We know what put her in that position. We got the exposition on, they'd been on the run for a couple weeks from those who had been chasing him in this. And then we get that just scene on the bridge after Riker goes and, gets her from sickbay and gets her up to the bridge. That look had more impact than any of the dialogue I think Gates McFadden had through most of the series. I mean, it's exactly what you said. Just the way she portrayed that look,
she gets to
and
act.
That exchange with not a single word of dialogue between her and Patrick Stewart.
There's so much emotion on both those people. I mean, you could break that down and make like a film class paper on it. Our buddy Andrew could write a film paper on it, but there you have these
no,
two.
He couldn't. There's no Kubrick.
That's true. You have these two friends / lovers who haven't seen each other in 20 years. There's animosity because they have not been able to see each other, and there's more behind that, and we'll get more behind that as we get deeper into the season. And then there's, Picard is exasperated. He's questioning her with his eyes. She sees that. She feels, pain and sadness and fear, and that last little bit where Picard finally realizes what she's telling him when she puts her head down and then comes back up and parts her lips, that look of, I should have told you. And then that's when Picard puts his head down and realizes that, yes, what Riker has been trying to tell me for the entire episode, and what I've already known in my head, but I didn't want to believe it, is true. And that scene is wonderful. I completely agree.
I also love the one on the turbo lift with Riker and Picard with Riker. Like, do you not see this?
Yeah, and it's just two friends.
Like, is this not obvious?
Yeah, are you not seeing what I'm seeing? Riker, as much as we've been saying Gates McFadden gets a lot to do, Jonathan Frakes, my goodness, he gets so much to do in this season. You guys haven't seen anything yet, and he gets to play. And that's actually what I said in my initial review of season 3, is this is not just bringing everybody in there for nostalgia's sake. Everyone in this show gets time to play. They get time to actually have fun in their roles. No one has a cameo. They all have a reason to be there. To that point, I want to follow up on something you said too, Blake, and something we've talked about already too, is I absolutely like the fact that they give reasons for things to happen. And there's one coming up that I referred to in our season 3 review that hasn't happened yet. But every time something happens that could be kind of hokey or could be a plot hole or just kind of weird, they explain it to us. And they say, here's why it's not. So, for example, you were talking about, why does Beverly Crusher, a doctor, blast this guy to smithereens? And Picard points it out to Riker and Jack in this episode. She would not have called for help just to protect herself. This is why I know Jack is her son, because she would not have called for help just for her. She wanted to protect him. Why did she take those guys out? Because she wanted to protect Jack. And as we saw at the beginning of this episode, they have been hunted. And so she has had to do things that she would not normally do in order to protect her son. And we will get more into that as we get deeper into the season. But they are explaining it to you. You may not like the explanation, and I get that. But they are giving you reasons. It's not just happening so Beverly can have an action scene. There's a reason why she's doing this stuff. Let's see what we got here. Bill says, Wokel says, I would love to have, hold on, I'm catching up. Sorry, guys. Let's see. Bill says, well, it's basically a movie split into 10 parts. By the way, Patrick Stewart in a season 3 launch event said he'd love to do a movie. Yeah, there's been a lot of talks of this not being the end, but I don't know how this ends. Blake and I are still 4 episodes away from knowing how this ends. I did reach out to Terry Metalis. and said, "Hey, Terry, can you make my dreams come true and give me the last 4 episodes?" And he says, "No one has the last 4 episodes yet, and I have to wait." So thanks, Terry. Let's see. Vocal says, "It was just so funny how Riker reads Picard's mind without even talking to each other, and takes action." Yeah, those two you can tell, they are so well written at this point that they have been together in these predicaments for 2 decades on both the Enterprise D and the Enterprise E. They know how each other work, and so they don't have to talk. They just act. But I will say, and I can't go into details, that dynamic becomes a point of drama later on in the season. It absolutely does. Let's see. Bill says, "Was it explained why they couldn't put B4 back together since he's in parts in the drawer?" They actually did say in season 1 that B4 was beyond repair. So there was more to it than that, but basically he was beyond repair. And then they copied one synapses to make an android, but let's ignore season 1. Wokel says, "That was always my hope. Riker finally steps up as a leader he actually is." You're going to like season 3 for that reason. Jonathan Frakes gets a lot to do. And Bill says, "By the way, it's funny how Terry got his name in the show with Metalis Prime." Yes, Terry absolutely did name the planet Metalis Prime, although that's not the first time we've heard about Metalis Prime. It did come up in a other show. I believe it was Enterprise. Yes, it was Enterprise. Trip Tucker mentions Metalis Prime in Enterprise because Terry Metalis worked on Enterprise. The one question I skipped over in our chat was how I wanted to end this thing, and that was Wokel asked us, "Do we think season 3 redeems season 1 and season 2?"
So I think you have to take it apart from season 1 and 2. I think the one way you could look at Picard is they almost talked at one point about wanting to do a Star Trek anthology type series. And I think Picard almost follows that in a way that, season 2 is loosely connected to season 1. Season 1 is the start of it, but season 3 is not really connected back to those two. You've got bits and pieces. You've got Raffi. You've got the La Sirena. But you can watch this without having seen either of those 2 seasons and pretty much be okay. And so I don't want to say that it redeems them because I think it's its own thing. I think Terry Metalis recreated this as a new show for season 3.
Yeah, and Bill says in the chat, really season 3 should have been season 1. And
it should have been.
I agree. When they did that announcement at the Vegas convention several years ago, before the pandemic, and they said, "Hey, Patrick Stewart's coming back, and we're going to do a show with Patrick Stewart," I assumed it was going to be not fully a TNG show, but it was going to be getting the gang back together, and we're going to do some stories. But I also know Patrick Stewart did not want that. He wanted a more reflective discussion of Picard, and really, after watching season 1, season 2, it was a more reflective view of Patrick Stewart. He put a lot of himself into those stories. He had an abusive father. He had an estrangement with his mother, stuff like that. It was really cathartic for Patrick Stewart, and that's great, and that's fine, but that's not, I think, what the fans wanted to see. So I agree with you, Blake, and I'm glad you said it, because that's a great point. I don't think season 3 redeems season 1, season 2. I don't think it has to. We were getting into an argument with Ryan from the Yum Yum podcast yesterday, where he's like, "Well, season 1, season 2 has just burned me, and I refuse to give season 3 a chance." And I told Ryan at the end, I was like, "That's your loss. This is a different show. This is a different story. We get the characters that we missed and loved. We get some exciting things that you guys are not expecting." I've been loving to watch all the predictions, and actually, I'm going to ask you guys in the chat what your predictions are, because Blake and I can't predict because we know what happens next. I've been loving to watch the theories because they're so out there, and yet they're not out there enough. What is actually happening in this show is going to blow people's minds, and it makes sense. Again, it's not something like, "Hey, here's something we're just going to throw in there to shake things up." No, There's a reason why these things are happening. There is a reason why Vatic is doing what she is doing. There is a reason why the Crushers were chased around everywhere. All of this will be explained, and it will be interesting to see the fan reaction. I was blown away and excited when I found out what was going on. Blake, I think you were in the same boat because I got oh shit text from you when you found out. But I'm excited to see where the fans feel this happens and what's happening here. So,
There's one in particular I'm looking forward to watching the online for.
Yes, actually, I don't want to say too much because I'll give stuff away. But another content creator put out a list of the most underused characters in TNG. That list is going to be interesting to watch here in about 2 months. Let's see. Wokel says, I hope Worf talks some sense in the Starfleet, but I don't know what is going on. Worf is going to have a very active role in this story, and I'll leave it at that. Bill says, well, in season 2, he did get Whoopi to come back. Yeah, because you definitely had characters sprinkled in season 1, season 2. But as Blake and I have said, and as Terry Metalis, the showrunner, has said, this is the TNG movie that we should have got to end the series. And there is one content creator out there who supposedly has seen the last 4 episodes. And after I saw his video, that's when I went out to Terry and said, hey, can I get the last 4 episodes? He says, after watching the last 4 episodes, which are the episodes that Blake and I have not seen, that the last 2 episodes are literally a movie that start and end as a cinematic film. And everything that you see from episodes 1 through 8 are build up to that movie. So I am extremely excited to see what happens with episode 9 and 10 when we get there, because we haven't seen it yet. Let's see. Janice says, and welcome to the chat, Janice says, honestly, season 1, season 2 could have been great, but the writing was lazy. There's a lot of reasons why season 1, season 2 were a problem. And yes, laziness is absolutely one of them. I agree. Bill says, well, I know one thing, Q doesn't come back this season. Well, I would have to agree with you based on what we saw in season 2. And I will say the one redeeming thing for me with season 2 is the interactions with Q and Picard. I think one of the most well-written scenes between 2 characters in the TNG universe is that scene where Q is explaining to Picard why he has been dogging Picard for the better part of 30 years. And when John Delancey says, you matter to me, that's Star Trek. And so as much as I didn't like season 2 that much, and Blake and I both said basically you could cut out the middle fat and just have the first episode and the last episode, that interaction with John Delancey and Patrick Stewart's really good. Let's see. Wokel, season 1 and 2 got me upset, but with the cast and decent writing, I will have to watch it so I never give up on the TNG news story. And I think, Wokel, that's the point. We are getting a new TNG story. I mean, the first episode of the season was called The Next Generation. Let's see. Bill says, by the way, I hear that Tasha is appearing in a flashback, but I don't know if CeeLo will appear. Well, we'll have to see. Wokel does last 2 episodes. Those last 2 episodes sound amazing. I can't wait. Yep, I agree. I can't wait either. And Blake and I are pissed off because we are still ahead of you guys by 4 more weeks. So not only are we having to wait for you all to catch up with us, but now we are going to have to wait 2 months to get to the conclusion. And I will say, episode 6, which is where we stopped, ends on a cliffhanger, and it's really frustrating. Not in a bad way. It's just I want to see episode 7. Yeah, and Bill says, and to think there's only 8 episodes to go. This is going to go at a clip. Blake and I both watched the 6 episodes in a night. And I think, Blake, I think you did in one sitting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they go at a clip.
You didn't give me much choice.
No, I told you had to watch them. Yes, that is true. And Janice says, I hate the last scene between Q and Picard because Q was out of character. I disagree. 100% disagree.
Yeah, so do I. Well, and I think some of that, too, is the framing of this was framed as Q was dying.
Yep.
And we've seen this quite a bit, not just in film or television as a used thing, but even in life when someone's nearing the end and they have those comments that they want to make, those confessions or those feelings that they want to express, they do that. And I think this was Q at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always been this question of why has Q been so fixated with Picard throughout Star Trek?
Mm-hmm.
And this was the answer. Q at the end looks and says, "You matter to me."
Because it's I mean, we're just reiterating the scene now, but it's Picard's like, is it because I have to do something in the future? Is there something that is universe defining? And Q's like, no, I just care about you. That's it. It has nothing to do with the fate of mankind in the universe. I just care. Yeah, no, I absolutely love that scene, and I don't think it was out of character. I agree with Blake on that. Bill says, we need some fan fiction where we have Trek crossover with B5, because no one ever has written any B5 Trek fan fiction, ever.
I would Google that because I'm thinking there is.
Oh, I know there is. Just be careful because some of them fall into the fan fiction that may be not safe for work. Let's see. And then Wokel says, might as well add Stargates. Well, yeah, that's a conversation for another day. And Kevin's not here. He's our resident Stargate fan. Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there for... Oh, Blake, we're not going to wrap it up here. Blake, go for it.
So, again, and Scott, you and I have been reading the reviews on this, too, as they're coming through. And, as we've gotten this argument with Ryan and encouraging people to watch this, is don't let season 1 and 2 be what decides for you to watch this. I mean, check this out. This is different. But at the same time, there are going to be fans of Star Trek, alleged fans of Star Trek out there that are not going to like this. And they're looking for reasons not to. I agree with what I believe it was Brent from Babylon for the first time said on the 30th anniversary show when Star Trek came up. Or not on that. It was on their own Star Trek Picard review.
Yeah.
Brent made a comment that even when Star Trek's not at its greatest, he's still a fan.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a group of reviewers out there who are searching for something to hate here. And I'm sorry, Engadget is one of the worst at this right now because they've sat there and complained in the past that, they miss what Star Trek was. They miss old Star Trek. This new stuff isn't Star Trek. Well, now they've got this, which is Star Trek. And all they're doing is sitting there going, it's a rehash of Star Trek. It's a rehash of everything that's been done. All they're doing is all these tropes that have been in all the movies from the original series, from the Bennett movie era movies, and all this stuff. It's like, well, one, no, it's not. The story it definitely pulls on some themes, but it is an original story. It is Star Trek. And, give it a chance to be what it's going to be, is what I would say. So I would say, honestly, tune out a lot of the noise. Give this a watch. The creatives, the cast, they deserve that. They deserve going into this and giving it a chance.
Well said. I agree. And actually, Sci-Trek just popped into the chat. Hey, Sci-Trek. I actually got to join a live stream with Sci-Trek last week or 2 weeks ago now, and that's always fun. It's good to have a fellow nerd in here. He says, Q was in character but not used well. Most of what he did in the second season seemed irrelevant. I agree. And that's why Blake and I have both said, if you take episode 1 and episode 10 of season 2 and put them together, you get a decent kind of movie, and you can just cut out the fat in the middle. Much like the Galaxy class, it's too fat. And then Sidetrack says, this will be the season of Star Trek these characters deserve, thankfully. I agree. And then Bill says, what's out after Picard? Lower Decks, Prodigy, Strange New Worlds. Well, we know Strange New Worlds season 2 has been filmed, is in the can. We know Star Trek Discovery season 5 has been filmed and in the can. I believe, just based on what I've seen, Discovery season 5 will be the next to come out, but it has not been announced yet. And we do know that there will be a Lower Decks season 3, and there will be a Prodigy season 2, but those have not been announced on when they will come out yet. I think Prodigy season 2 is the one that's still in production, and I don't know where Lower Decks is, but I know they've announced a season 3. So yeah. Okay, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there for this week. Thanks everybody again for joining us. This has been a good conversation. Blake and I will be back here next week to talk 17 seconds. And I will say that 2 things. One, I really enjoy this episode that's coming, and I'm not going to say why. But also, the one thing I will say to Blake's point about give season 3 a chance, the other complaint I have had with New Trek, and I have enjoyed a lot of the New Trek, but is they drag stuff out too long. I will say with this show, it does move at a clip, and we get to different plot points as we go. So if you're worried that we're going to be stuck in a nebula with the Titan for 10 episodes, don't worry. Things move. Things change. Science Trek says, the galaxy's beautiful. More of her to love. As Queen would say, flat-bottom girls make the world go round. But the Sovereign class is better. And Janice says, I was really hoping Jack Crusher was actually Jack Crusher's senior son. Yeah, but then he would be like 60 years old. So, but I hear you. Okay, Bill says, great show. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it, and we will be back here next week again to talk 17 seconds. Blake, anything you want to add before we say goodbye?
I would just say make sure, for those of you that are following us that may be new around here, check out our other content. We do a regular show where we are going through Babylon 5 with a group of newbies, as well as those of us who have watched for a while. We also have some bonus content where we have interviewed cast members from that. And some of our crew is even doing their own podcast, watch-along review of The Last of Us. So make sure to check out the other content that we have here on Gray 17 and follow us at all of our socials down below.
Yes, and along with that, make sure on YouTube that you click subscribe, the thumbs up, and that notify button. We were live last night celebrating the 30th anniversary of Babylon 5. We're obviously live right now. And we're going to be continuing to do lives as we go, as we build out this YouTube community. So if you want to know when we go live, click that bell icon. And we will end with Sidetrack saying, yes, the Enterprise E is better. I agree with you. Okay, guys, have a good one. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.